A new study shows exposure to polluted air is similar to smoking a pack of cigarettes a day.
Jacqueline Howard, writer for CNN Health and Wellness, is with
all
us
the
now.
plastic that enters the ocean.
Yeah, we know that obviously polluted air is bad for us,
about
but
1%
this
of it.
bad?
The other 99%.
So it might not seem like it, but it's the middle of the day here in Beijing.
So there's a study that found that
The little kid, I remember picking up.
A recent study shows that even breathing the
As a society, we have seen several documentaries, videos, ads, and lessons, all teaching us the same thing. They bombard us with horrific facts about how our planet is dying and how people are suffering, and consequently, we've become desensitized to this. We hear so much about global temperatures rising, how this year we'll hit a new heat record, or maybe about how many millions of kilometers of coral reefs have died. That's what should be horrific. Devastating information just isn't. Our brains are not meant to process what 5.25 trillion pieces of plastic in the ocean means. Yeah, we know it's a big number, but so is a billion, and so is a million. The point is, our brain was not meant to deal with these big numbers. Not meant to understand what 5.25 trillion actually represents. Not meant to understand that 5 trillion is 500,000 billions. Not meant to understand that a billion is 1,000 millions. These terrifying numbers don't terrify us because we simply don't understand them. And because we're used to hearing them all the time in our media. Some may call it negligence, some incompetence. In reality, it's basic human nature to not care about things we cannot control. So when we're told that the entire ocean, something whose scale we cannot even come close to fathoming, is overflowing with plastic and then millions or billions of animals are dying, we simply don't care. How can we? Why should we be expected to? We were not designed to take care of our planet. We were biologically engineered to be selfish. It should then be clear what a massive challenge that the team behind the film, A Plastic Ocean, had to undergo during their effort to create a film that got audiences to care. And not only to care, but to care so much that they act. Despite the massive challenge that was presented to Craig Leeson and his team, they succeeded in making a beautifully depressing documentary that got people to care. Today, we'll be looking at how they accomplished this. Today, we'll be looking at how the film, A Plastic Ocean, masterfully manipulates its audience into caring. A Plastic Ocean is a participatory documentary released in April 2016. It was directed by and prominently features Craig Leeson, as well as world record holder freediver Tanya Streeter. The crew meets with various scientists and experts all around the world as they explore the negative repercussions of plastic and its disposal. From the ocean to third world countries, and even in our very own backyard, the film shows us how every living thing is affected by the vicious cycle of plastic usage and disposal. The way it masterfully plays with our heartstrings like a puppet master can be attributed to 3 major ideas, and consequently correlated to 3 specific scenes. In this video essay, we'll be going through each idea and its corresponding scene, breaking down everything from the overarching idea behind the scene to the specifics of the cinematography and soundtrack. Let's start by taking a look at how the film solved the problem brought up in the introduction of this video essay: how to make people care about unfathomable, incomprehensible numbers and facts. A Plastic Ocean utilizes a fundamental principle of human psychology, the fact that we care about people, not numbers. When the viewer sees a statistic like 160 million people die annually in natural disasters, their brain simply processes that as a fact and sees no reason to correlate it with emotion. Of course, they know it's supposed to be socially regarded as sad, so they learn early on in life that acting like these statistics are impactful is socially mandated, and so they do so. Rarely will a statistic make the audience feel sad. But when they hear a story of a single family who has lost his son or daughter, and they see those human emotions, then they are able to feel that remorse. When it becomes about people and not numbers, then, and only then, are we able to empathize and remorse. So it makes sense that A Plastic Ocean does exactly this. In this scene, Craig Leeson goes to Manila, a city in the Philippines where garbage has been dumped for almost 20 years. This is so much garbage that it covers an area equivalent to almost 2,000 tennis courts. About 2,000 Manilian families live on top of what is essentially these large garbage mountains.
The smell is almost indescribable. It's kind of like a cross between sewage and oil.
The camera stays low to the ground to make us feel as if we're suffocated within the garbage ourselves.
The ground to within 2 inches above it is covered in flies.
Here, we see a boy rummaging through the garbage. Slowly, the camera changes focus, revealing the rusted wire fence, metaphorically symbolizing that he is trapped or a prisoner to the garbage.
I could see a child flying a kite. You could see the kite was made from a plastic bag, and he'd fashioned this himself and used straws as the mainframe for the kite. If you got behind him and looked towards the sky, he could have been any child anywhere in the world.
This is a very powerful line from Leeson. The line forces us to relate the suffering of this child to every other child in our society, to show that he is no different than any of us. It's not just the line. The camera is pointed up at the beautiful sky as Leeson describes it. This makes us further relate the idea of the kid being a kid in our society. Seconds later, once we are thinking about this, the camera switches to face the boy, revealing the scores of plastic and garbage all around him. What this mini sequence achieves is that we have first believed the kid to be from our community, then the shot switches to show the child is in danger. Instinctively, we want to protect him, and because we can't, we are left to feel sorry for him. Leeson then goes to spend some time with local boys and asks them some questions about their lifestyle. Let's take a look. There's an establishing shot that begins the scene filled with garbage, and then slowly pans over to boys playing basketball. This serves two purposes. The first is showing us how these boys are playing in unhealthy and awful conditions, and the second is humanizing them. Many kids around the world play basketball, and when we see them do it, it reminds us that they are still kids, whether that is in our own city or thousands of kilometers away.
Ready? I have to say, you're all much better basketballers than I am. I'm so bad. I'm sorry. I'm no good at basketball. You're very good at basketball. This guy.
Thank you.
Very good. Do you all live here?
Yeah.
In Pier 18?
Oh, yes.
And you play basketball all the time?
The way the dialogue is then conducted is very informal, with many kids talking over each other and kids playing and laughing. This shows us how even in their terrible situation, the kids are still trying to make the best of it, and it's heart-wrenching. Throughout their screams of happiness and laughter, we become more emotionally invested and connected to these kids.
All the time? Yeah. Do you go to school?
Yes. No.
No? Yes? You go to school? You don't go to school? No? No? So what do you do during the day?
Scavenger work.
Scavenging? Yeah? What do you scavenge for? The plastic?
Plastic.
Ah, and what do you do with the plastic once you...
Scrap. Go to the shop.
Yeah? And what do they give you for the plastic?
Money.
Money? Is it good money? What kind of money?
No, 150.
Yeah? Is that
1 day.
for 1 day?
Yeah.
And what do you do with the money?
And give my mother.
Your mother?
Yeah.
Yes? And what does she do with the money?
Buy the rice.
The rice? Right, so you can grow up, be healthy, play good basketball.
We learn from one of the boys that he scavenges through the plastic and garbage to trade it for some money, so that he and his mother can buy rice. Because of the time spending doing that, he cannot go to school. And just like that, he goes from being a statistic of lack of education into a real human. With a story. A kid who's trying to provide for himself and his mother.
Show me, give me a shot.
The shot then returns to the kids playing basketball, again bringing back the idea that these suffering kids are real, not just distant numerical figures. The humanization of the suffering caused by the plastic garbage is a key way that the film gets us to care about the effects of where our garbage, and specifically our plastic, goes. A plastic ocean does something very clever in this scene. It does not focus on the facts of how many animals die due to the ingestion of plastic, since there's no guarantee that the audience would believe it, especially in today's day and age of misinformation. Secondly, even if they do believe it, that statistic is just like all other statistics, and would go into one year and come out the other, leaving very minimal effect on them. Instead, what it does is so much more impactful. Let's take a look. First, it shows the audience that this bird is slowly dying. The whole time, the camera stays close and personal to the bird, giving us the best sense of emotion that can be expressed from a dying animal. For over a minute and a half, there is no dialogue. The music is slow and rhythmic, using minor chords to increase the saddening and depressing emotional response. Even the sounds of the waves crashing adds to the general gloomy and sad tone. This lack of dialogue, as well as a perfectly engineered soundtrack, makes the animal's death quite sad. The next scene, however, truly makes the animal's death unjust. Let's take a look.
Yeah, the stomach is very, very full, and if we look here, there's some very dark pieces, some very light white pieces, and if you see, as I push on this, it's absolutely rigid, completely full of plastic all the way up.
Oh, look at that.
Absolutely no doubt that this bird died as a result of that plastic. That is literally a gut full of plastic. It's quite alarming, isn't it?
Oh, it's awful.
Range of plastic types and colours. We've got everything from the blues and the reds
His
to the
stomach's just filled with it. Big pieces too.
big sharp
Heavy.
pieces.
Oh wow, look at the size of that big black piece.
That is an enormous piece of plastic.
Unbelievable. Look at the size of that. Jen, I counted 234 pieces of plastic out of that one bird. Is that a record?
Not even close, unfortunately. So for the species, the record is 276 pieces of plastic inside of one 90-day-old chick.
Seeing the plastic in the bird's stomach fills us with a sense of disgust. The film does not need to explain how much of a tragic, painful death this must have been for the animal. That much should be abundantly clear to the audience. The montage of the two of them making a mosaic out of the plastic from the bird's stomach shows us just how much plastic was inside the bird before it died. Then, Leeson asks if this was a record, and Dr. Jennifer Lavers declines, saying it's far from it. This is meant to stretch our minds to imagine how much more suffering other birds go through, and how much more plastic they ingest before finally dying.
And that plastic, when we weighed it out, accounted for 15% of that bird's body mass, so that's a pretty scary statistic. If we translate that into human terms, it gets even worse. That would be equivalent to you and I having somewhere around 6 or 8 kilos of plastic inside of your stomach. It's equivalent to about 12 pizzas worth of food inside of your stomach.
The film then delves into the statistics of what this level of plastic means. However, this, unlike most facts, does not go over our heads. This happens for two reasons. The first is that the numbers are small enough for our brains to fully comprehend them. And the second, and perhaps more important reason, is that in the end, she relates it to us. When she says it's like having 12 pizzas in our stomach, we can relate to the idea of feeling bloated after only having one. So we can only imagine the pain that the bird feels by having the equivalent of 12 pizzas made entirely of sharp, inedible, undigestible plastics within its stomach.
A food inside of your stomach?
There's a shot of a living bird floating. Then it displays a statistic about how 90% of birds eat plastic in their life. And then the film cuts to the same bird lying dead, belly up on the water. This visual storytelling makes our brains correlate the fact of ingesting plastic to death, if it was not already obvious. Finally, we get a statistic with no correlation to us and provides no visual metaphor, and is too large to fathom. So just a simple numerical statistic. So we would ignore it, right? It would have no effect. Wrong. Although this fact has none of those things, it has kairos. Kairos is a rhetorical strategy just like ethos, pathos, and logos. Translated from Greek, it stands for the right time or opportunity. That means talking about a topic to the people at the right time. The right time can be defined by events in that person's life, the current political or social climate, and even what point in the day they are in. A practical example is how kids shouldn't ask their parents for something if they've had a hard day at work. The fact is effective because of its kairos, its timing. When presented, the viewer should already feel sad for the animals. So when the fact states how much damage has been done since the viewer has been watching this video, it leaves an impact. Realistically, the number could have been anything. It's not the number itself, but the time the number was shown, and what it represents. Skipping it forward a little bit in the scene, we can see another dissection of a bird. Overall, it provides the same effect due to the same reasons as the previous scene. However, where the scene differs a little is that at the end. Let's have a look.
To try and wrap your mind around the condition of this animal and the quality of its life really is quite an overwhelming thing. I do have some pretty rough days, have to go home and really wrap my mind around where do we go from here.
This voice overlay at the end serves the purpose of preparing the audience for what is to come. It makes the audience sad, yes, but its primary function is to preface what's coming up. Then, in the conclusion of the shot, the film masterfully executes the idea we've been explaining throughout the scene. It shows, it does not tell. We get beautifully disturbing visuals of all the plastic found in each bird put back into its dead body, so we can see the extent of the plastic in its body when it was alive. With the dialogue about suffering fresh in mind, the scene backs it up, showing impossibly large quantities of plastic within the birds' bodies. This our brains can understand. Not numbers or words, but intelligent imagery. At the beginning of the scene, all the audio is stripped back and the same sad music is allowed to louden. Now, the same sad music carries so much more weight to it, since we've already correlated that music mentally with these emotions of sadness from the previous section of the scene. Finally, when we've accumulated all this sadness, and it's all on the top of our minds, it delivers its final blow. It waited for the perfect moment. It used kairos perfectly. It shows pictures of birds slowly dying in pain on the beach, before fading to black, killing the music, and leaving us with nothing but our thoughts for a while. This scene is perhaps the most heart-wrenching scene in the film, and it does it by cultivating the perfect moment, waiting for it, and then showing us what they wanted to prove. Not by bombarding the viewer with words and facts, no, but by showing them. This scene masterfully utilizes kairos, the act of waiting for the right moment, and visual storytelling, showing, not saying. The effect is a gut-wrenching scene that makes the audience feel immense remorse. So far, we've looked at how the film gets the audience to care about other living creatures, and the effect our waste has on them. First human beings, and then other animals. Now we'll look at how the film gets the audience to care not for others, but for themselves, by putting their own safety at risk and taking advantage of our selfish human nature. This scene is a bit different into the techniques it employs. This is because it's not going to try and make the audience feel sorry for themselves. Rather, it's going to try and frighten them so that they're scared of what could happen to them if they continue to use plastics. In other words, it's going to use ethos and logos rather than pathos like previous scenes did. Its goal is to make the audience care about themselves, and the human body naturally has quite a few ways of making sure it does this. The best being fear. Fear can make us do almost anything, so the hope is that if we are scared enough, we will stop using plastics altogether. The scene opens with a shot of several test tubes and scientific gadgets, in what seems to be a high-tech lab. This leads the audience to believe that what follows will be scientifically accurate and thus trustworthy. This improves the scene's ethos.
Plastipure is where we formulate and test plastics for their physical characteristics. On the Sodichem side, where we are here, we test plastics and other substances as well as individual chemicals to see if they have estrogenic activity. A lot of plastics, perhaps the great majority, probably, release chemicals that have estrogenic activity.
Then we have an introduction to Dr. George Bittner, who is a professor of neurobiology. This helps to further build our trust in the scene.
Estrogenic activity, or EA, happens when a chemical like BPA or phthalate leaches from plastic and enters the body, where it mimics the hormone estrogen. 92.6% of Americans aged 6 and older have detectable levels of BPA in their bodies. The levels in children between 6 and 11 years of age are twice as high as those in older Americans.
Here is its first attempt to scare the audience. It states that the viewer is very likely to have BPA in their body already, and if the viewer has a child or is a child, they have twice as much. The source is also cited as the CDC, which is a widely recognized institute, so this once again helps to build ethos. The context of the potency of chemicals like BPA is provided earlier in the film, with a scene with Professor Susan Jobling, the person who wrote the WHO report on these types of chemicals. Again, using sources like the WHO and the CDC go a long way in helping people to believe the facts. Let's take a quick look at her explanation of the health effects of the chemicals.
Professor Sue Jobling is the editor of the recent World Health Organization report on endocrine disruptors.
Endocrine disruption is disruption of the normal functioning of the body's hormonal system. They fool the body into thinking that they are hormones, and then they either block or mimic the action or production of hormones. And in doing so, they interfere with very many bodily processes: growth, metabolism, reproduction, and critically early development.
Knowing about the serious health effects of these chemicals, and then learning that the viewer likely has a lot of them in their body, is an effective way into scaring viewers. However, admittedly, the scene should have been presented immediately after or immediately prior to us learning this information, so that it's still fresh in our minds. After that, it definitely made up for it though, by doing something really smart.
In older Americans.
Are all of those chemicals not regulated?
No, the FDA at present does not have any regulations for how many chemicals and what levels of chemicals having estrogenic activity can be released from plastics or from cosmetics or papers or silicones.
So how is the general public protected from that kind of thing?
They aren't.
Often, when people feel threatened, instead of accepting the threat, they'll deny it, giving some explanation of why they think it's not prevalent or not a big deal. In our case, it was the classic, "My government wouldn't allow that. They must have a protocol or a policy in place to keep me safe." The film explicitly states there is no protection put in place by the FDA to help the general public. It does an excellent job of crushing that safety pad before it can even be put up by the viewer.
They aren't.
They aren't.
From baby bottles to sippy cups to food can liners to water bottles hydrating the youngest athletes, consumers have been exposed to a root chemical called bisphenol A or BPA, an artificial sex hormone used as a core building block in close to 7 billion pounds of plastic on the market today because of its strength and resiliency.
This isn't a weak contaminant. This is a powerful contaminant, and it's striking right at the core of American public health.
When something says that it's BPA free, is that something I can trust?
Over 90% of all plastics that don't have BPA, nonetheless, release chemicals having estrogenic activity.
So BPA is not the only bad guy that we need to be looking out for?
BPA is only one bad guy.
It then points out that popular safety labels such as BPA-free are nothing short of a scam. Although they don't contain BPA, it contains other harmful chemicals which function in the exact same way. Similar to when a company does not put sugar in the nutrition label and instead puts glucose.
So BPA is not the only bad guy that we need to be looking out for?
BPA is only one bad guy. It's like saying, I've caught Al Capone.
Yeah.
I've just handled the criminal problem in the United States.
We do quite a bit of this testing to see where the issues are, but we also use that data to help manufacturers make safer products.
Right. The average consumer goes, Pali wada wada? You know, I don't get it. Just tell me what is the right one, what is safe, what isn't. But
when we look at baby bottles, we have to look at all the different components that come in contact with the milk or with the baby. All of the hard and clear materials that we've tested leach these estrogenic chemicals. Other things like the nipple are generally made from silicone or latex. Latex always, from our test, has come back positive for EA, and silicone generally is positive for estrogenic activity.
And stainless steel is obviously, as I thought, a better option.
If it doesn't have a liner, stainless steel, it tends to be fine, and glass tends to be fine. The colorants tend to leach a lot of chemicals, so we try to stay away from colorants when we can.
Right.
When we can't, white and black tend to be
the least.
It then goes into even how metals might not be safe, due to their colorants. Essentially, what it's trying to do here is take away people's options to safety. If people feel there's a safe alternative available, say metal for example, they won't feel so scared of using the unsafe product, plastic, since if they wanted to, they could always switch. By not even having the option of the safe product, that puts our mind into survival mode, and we're ready to put more effort into creating or voicing for that safe alternative.
tend to be
the least. Okay. And we've started using a lot more foil in our house rather than this stuff.
Foil is a better option.
Okay.
We use foil in the lab because foil doesn't leach these chemicals.
And this, I know, styrofoam. It's a personal pet peeve of mine.
The likelihood is estrogenic chemicals will leach out of styrene products.
Cold fluids, anything.
Likely hot fluids would increase the amount of leaching, but it would still be leaching something.
The majority of plastics increase the release of chemicals having estrogenic activity after they've been exposed to particularly sunlight.
How do you not consume it? You can't go anywhere without seeing food wrapped in plastic. You can't go to a restaurant without, takeout boxes being in plastic, hot foods going into plastic.
My answer there is, well, demand safer plastic.
Right at the end, when the viewer is hopefully the most frightened, they provide a solution which is demanding safer plastics. This makes the viewer more likely to take that action, since they feel their safety is truly in peril. The process of trying to scare the viewer is a delicate one though. If the film went overboard, the audience would feel as if the film is fear-mongering them. If they didn't do enough, the audience simply won't care. The film is fairly effective in drawing the line, and since it had built up its ethos through using reliable sources such as the WHO and the CDC, as well as speaking to multiple experts in the field about the issue, viewers are more likely to trust it. Additionally, throughout the entire scene, it uses a similar soundtrack to what was used during the dying and suffering of the birds. At this point, the soundtrack has become a recurring theme that will immediately remind the audience of those effects and instill feelings of dread and sadness. It can be argued that the soundtrack transfers those feelings that we felt for the birds into ourselves, and in so doing converts our feelings of pity to feelings of fear and self-preservation. However, the scene is not ideal. As mentioned before, the explanation of why these chemicals are actually bad occurs much later in the film, likely causing viewers to forget its importance. Secondly, unlike the previously discussed scene, it uses no effective visual medium to convey its information, and as talked about at the beginning of this video essay, facts, no matter where they are sourced from, can be called into questioning or outright ignored. Cutting open a bird and showing us the plastic inside of it cannot be. Nonetheless, the scene was still fairly effective in its overarching goal of instilling fear within viewers, in a hope that it will take action due to it. It accomplished this through establishing itself as reliable, and then taking away all the safety measures the viewer had, forcing them to accept the reality where they are constantly in danger due to the unsafe, toxic plastics they use. The film A Plastic Ocean masterfully manipulates its audience into caring about the issue of plastic pollution by humanizing facts, timely visualizing data, and instilling fear. As a whole, the documentary is very effective in achieving its goal. That's a good thing too, because it deals with a very important issue. If the documentary does its job, it'll be a part of the influence pushing people to live greener and healthier lives. That's not only good for the health of our citizens, but people, animals, and ecosystems all around the globe. The good news is the film has been widely watched, with it being screened in over 70 countries and on 6 continents. It was also critically acclaimed, receiving 14+ film festival awards. All this attention and love allowed it to have the following global impact. It phased out styrofoam containers in the EU embassy in Peru, changed legislations in Barbados and potentially Australia, and reduced plastic consumption in hotels in New York, Phuket, and Thailand. The movie gets us to care deeply for the animals and people affected. Although the film gives us logic and reason to care, and even explains how it affects us personally, where the film peaks is in making us care for the people and animals we otherwise would not care for. The scenes are heart-wrenching and gets us to care more about the issue than any large number or powerful facts ever could. Finally, it does one more special thing that sets it apart from other documentaries with a similar topic. Rather than just telling us how bad everything is and how it's going to get worse, leaving us feeling sad and depressed, towards the end, it presents many solutions that we as a nation and as an individual can do to help. By doing this, it achieves its main goal of getting people to care, but more importantly, it gets people to take action. This leaves the viewer feeling optimistic and wanting to help, rather than being sad and depressed. The film achieves its ultimate goal and purpose, making people care enough and then getting them to do something about it. In summary, A Plastic Ocean is a master at manipulating its audience into caring about its topic.